Welcome. Aloha. You're with the Believer's Journey, and I'm so glad you're with us today. We're now continuing our lessons, our series on lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And so we had to skip, a couple weeks ago, mostly because we had a storm in Texas that took out our electricity, it took out our water, took out our internet. Of course, if you don't have electricity, you're not going to have, internet. So anyway, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back. And today we're going to talk about lust of the eyes. We talked about lust of the flesh last time. And so we're going to talk about lust of the eyes. Now, before we get into just the lust of the eyes, I kind of want to recap a little bit about the lust of the flesh. And let me read the passage that we're going from. The passage is in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17. And this is what it says. It says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of the Father abides forever." So we talked about love last time and the idea about what are we supposed to love. And it says the loving of the world and the things of the world. And love, we see here is agapeo. That's the term love. And the term here is basically means to freely to give of yourself morally. Okay. It basically, love can be known for its actions. It's what it produces. God's love given as a gift of his son, Jesus, to us. Okay. So basically, it's also love of the believer, whether toward other believers or toward others generally. It's not our feelings. Okay. It's from our natural instincts. It's basically that which is a choice. Okay. Agapeo love seeks the welfare of all. It seeks the opportunity to do good to all people, especially toward other believers. Okay, so I want to just capture that and then go on. And basically, when we talk about lust, the idea of lusting comes from the word that is love, which has a double definition, a positive and a negative. One which is that which is affection, okay, and that which is lust, which is a negative meaning. That word is epithumia, and it's a longing, especially what is forbidden, okay? It consists of selfish lust, to lust after. But then again, it's also what is that which I said, when you have affection for one another. I have affection for my friends. You have affection for your friends, for your parents. And, it's just kind of an affectionate love. So there's a positive into it, and there's also a negative. And we have to understand that. So in this passage here, when we talk about lusting of the flesh or lusting of the eyes, okay, we're talking about that negative side of epithumia, okay, the negative side of love. Okay, so that's kind of what we're at with the idea of loving and lusting. So that almost sounds a little bit funny to say it that way. So let's talk about the eyes. This is interesting, an interesting wording here. In the Bible, it talks a lot about, what we do and what comes from us in our flesh, in our carnal nature, our own self-will. And it also talks about the things that we see that we desired to go to. Simply put, the lust of the eyes is like the sinful desire to possess the things that we see, or to have the things that are visually appeal to us. Okay, it's like coveting money. It's coveting possessions. It's coveting other physical things that are not from God. Okay, but they're from the world that is around us. Now, John emphasizes that these physical things do not last, that they will pass away. And in contrast, he says that the child of God is guaranteed eternity. So in this respect, we got to understand, the lust of the eyes, we need to be careful because it's all about coveting. Okay, that's another term I think we can use for lust of the eyes is coveting or envy. We could talk about the things of envy. I envy, this car. I envy, this job. I envy this woman. I envy this man. Whatever. It's envy. It's coveting, and the Bible, even in the Ten Commandments, addresses that we shall not covet, and it gives you all these different things that we shouldn't covet. Okay, so I wanted to bring that out so we understand that there are differences, but in together, I think the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes, what it's doing is it's covering all bases. Okay, and I think the Bible's good at that, at covering all bases when it brings about stuff that we really need to know that God is trying to either warn us about or teach us about. Just like when we're talking about Jesus, the Word created all things, but then it covers all bases, and there was nothing that was ever created that was created except for through Him. So he bases it on both sides, so we don't lose that idea, and God covers all bases. I want to read a passage in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, and I think that we can get an idea of this lust of the flesh, eyes, and pride of life through this passage, because we see these sins enter into our lives, into mankind, right at the moment of the 3rd chapter in Genesis. And it says here, so when the woman that saw the tree was good for food, okay, and it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she gave some to her husband, who was also with her, and he ate, because he was stupid. No, it really doesn't say that last part, but basically, it just says here, she gave it to him, and he ate. Okay, so the fruit, we don't know what the fruit is. The fruit was just on a tree, and it says here, it was a delight to the eyes. Okay. God told Adam and Eve not to eat of the fruit of that tree. He told them, don't do it. And the serpent talked them into it because he says, look at, God's just trying to make you not want to be like him. And if you eat this fruit, you'll see that you won't die. You'll see that you'll be like him. You'll see that you'll be God. And so all the 3 things we're talking about are in this very act of the fall in the garden. And so here we see the delight of the eyes. I think that we need to be careful as a human type person, that when we see something that's delightful to us, to our eyes, that is pleasant, we need to be careful what we are looking at. I've heard people say that, for a guy, if you look at a woman, Jesus says that if you look at a woman with lust, that you're committing adultery. So basically, I've heard some people say, well, how long can you look at a woman before, you can commit adultery? Because obviously, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody, so he says, well, let's give it 3 seconds or 5 seconds. But I tend to say, why even go that direction? I mean, if you're going to look at somebody that's obviously not going to be in the desire that God has given you and is of the desire of the world, look away. I mean, not to the point that if you're going somewhere, you're going to crash into something or whatever. But I mean, why tempt yourself in looking at someone or something to give you that idea of that temptation to feel good and then look away real quick? You're playing with fire. Why play with fire? James talks about that. We don't need to be playing with fire. I mean, we don't tell little kids, the oven is hot, the stove is hot, but put your hand over it just in case you want to feel what it's like. No, we don't do that. That's not right. It's not smart. So I think we need to be careful. In James chapter 1, verse 14, he says this. He says, each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. I've always been teaching that our worst enemy is not necessarily, I'm talking about you personally, your worst enemy is not necessarily, Lucifer or Satan. It's you. You have this sin nature. You have this nature that desires to do wrong, that desires the lust of the world or lust of the flesh or lust of the eyes. And it's your worst enemy. It's the things that we fight against. And I believe that we need to fight against that. We need to realize the things that are in the world that draw us, entice us over there, help us to covet things, or we become envious of people or things to want these things we see. We need to be careful of that and turn from that and run. We just need that to be there, because if those are not things of God, then we are playing with fire of the things that are not of God. And most likely, this is how a lot of people have fallen. This is how a lot of people have backslidden. This is how a lot of people have broken and torn apart their families. So we want to be careful about the lust of the eyes, because it tantalizes our desires. It tantalizes our covetousness, okay? And it brings about our envy. And these are not good things. These are things that are going to pull us away from God, that are going to have us fall down. And we really, really, really need to be careful, okay? So when we talk about lust of the flesh, we're talking about this. You don't want to desire the lust after the things that are of the carnal nature, the things that are not of God, okay? We talked about that last week. And it's about the eyes. You don't want to lust or envy after those things that are pleasing to our eyes, or those things that are pleasing of the world and not pleasing of God. Our desire is to honor Jesus. Our desire is to honor God, to become like him, to do that which, I guess a good way to say it is make him feel proud of us. I want God to feel proud of me, because I am living a life of holiness that is reaching out to become like him. It's like a little child, a little boy or girl that wants to be like their mommy or daddy. They want to do this because they want their mommy or daddy to feel proud of them. I have a pastor I've mentioned, I don't know, maybe 100 times in all my shows put together. His name is Lon Ekdahl. And I so desire for him to be proud of me. He's like my dad. He's my mentor. He's my pastor. He's everything in that respect to me. And I so want his, like a little child to a father, his approval. But more than that, I really want him, I want to honor him, and I want him to be proud of my work. So when we look at that on a human basis, we should be able to see much more how we want to honor God in our lives. So we need to be careful of this lusting of these things in the world, lusting of the flesh, and especially now lusting of the eyes, because it will hurt us. We will fall. We will end up in mental and physical, emotional torment. We really want to stay away from this and make good decisions as much as possible. I want to read again. I think I read this last week in Romans chapter 8, verse 14. I may not have read it, I'm not sure. But it says this: for those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. So my question to you, what is leading you? Is it your lust of the eyes? Is it your envy? Is it your covetousness? Is it the things in the world that are leading you? Are they tempting you? Are you justifying your 5-second look? Are you justifying the things that you do that may cause a fall of your own life, or even harming somebody else to fall, who watches you in your life? Or are you being led by the Spirit of God? Are you walking, as Paul says in Galatians, 5, walk by the Spirit? Are you walking by the Spirit? My challenge to you is that you walk by the Spirit of God. Because if you walk by the Spirit of God, if you're led by the Spirit of God, Paul says in Romans that you are a child of God. And I think that that's really our goal, and it's what we really need to look at. So when we look at, 1 John chapter 2, and we see, where John warns us about not loving the things in the world, okay? And he warns us about the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes. And the next 2 weeks from now, the pride of life. He warns us of these things. And he tells us the things that these things desire and go for, they're going to pass away. They will be gone. But he also concludes with that and says, but those who do the will of the Father will abide, or the word in Greek, remain forever. And that's really where we want to be. I'm sure that's where you want to be. So let's turn away from our covetousness, our envy, our lusting of the eyes, the things that tantalize us away from God, and learn how to look toward God and to Him and the things that will uplift Him and seek blessing from Him in our own lives from Him. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that your life is blessed. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share our message. And you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Aloha.